Russia's prepared to confront the West. They don't want to, but they're not going to sit back and keep getting poked in the chest with the Western finger, because you poke me one more time, I'm going to break your finger.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Larry. Hello, Ryan. Hello, our dear audience. It's May 26th now, so let's start our chat. Larry, I paid attention to your Substack today. It was two very interesting articles, but I would like to start with the newest one. It's about a call between Lavrov and Rubio. And I learned that it was at the order of Russian president that Lavrov called Rubio and once again informed him about Russian plans to carry out the strikes on Kiev. And here is a screenshot. It comes from directly from Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia. I don't know if it's viewable or not, but in general, to be very short, it was reported that Russia will now strike any drone-producing facilities, regardless of where they are located. And I think it was Rybkov who stated today that actually Russian patience is out and now we are going to strike. And he once again stressed that, as far as I understood from his speech, it means, we informed you. If you don't like what we told you, this is your problem and not Russian problem anymore. Do you think that there is a real change of stance in Russian position now?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Some have questioned why didn't Russia do this earlier? Why didn't do it 4 years ago? And I think there are two reasons. Number one, I believe that there are Russian intelligence assets that have penetrated both Ukrainian military, Ukrainian intelligence organizations. These intelligence assets are in these different institutions, organizations, and that Russia, there's always a trade-off. Do you keep the asset in place and allow activity to go on that otherwise you'd want to destroy because of the value of the intelligence you're getting out? Or do you finally reach a point where you say, okay, we're going to have to either sacrifice that intelligence asset or, terminate their mission? That's number one. Number two, that the presence of U.S. and other NATO or Western European officials in those locations. Again, I think Russia's calculation was we don't want to escalate to the point that we're killing these Europeans and Americans, because they could have issued this warning before, but they chose not to. But now that they have, it's very clear that they're going to attack these sites. Any foreigners that are left, they'll be killed. And Russia is not worried about escalation. That's what's clear out of this. If Europe wants to get upset and claim, hey, you're killing our personnel, Russia will say, we're going to double down. We'll kill your personnel in England, in Germany, in Romania. Because the Brits right now send a large number of drones, some long-range drones that are going to be used to attack inside Russia. And so Russia will put an end to that. So this is very significant. I think this represents a sea change, or let's call it, Vladimir Putin has finally said, okay, we're taking the gloves off. We're going to shut down these military and intelligence organizations.
And now I have read few minutes before the stream that Brits have already announced that such carrying out strikes on Kiev is a sign of Russian weakness. So I think according to European press, anything that Russia does is a sign of Russian weakness. Russia is abstaining, Russia is weak. Russia is striking, Russia is weak. So what they're trying to attain here, I don't know. I think they were trying to provoke Russia as much as they could to carry out strikes. Now when Russia says, yes, we will carry out strikes, and then they're again not satisfied with that.
Well, Yelena, put up I just put something in down below because I think, Larry, this addresses exactly what she's saying. This idiot Jay in Kiev back in 2024, he said, Russia doesn't know what they're up against, basically, that every level of Ukrainian society is engaged in some form of mass drone production, and it's going to win the war. And everybody's involved. So, these guys try to play the logic to the English-speaking audience both ways. First, they say, we're all involved. We're all fighting back. And now they're saying if you fight back against us, then, we are the victims. What is it?
Well, so Russia is now entitled to attack all of those facilities.
By that logic,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. If you're going to use a weapon, then you have entered the conflict and you're a target. That's what Russia made clear. The West continues to ignore what is taking place on the ground in Ukraine, in Donetsk, in Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, the steady progression, movement forward of Russian forces in Zaporizhia, Russian forces in Sumy, Russian forces in Kharkiv. I really think one of the that this is just not an idle threat directed at Kyiv, but that this is part of a coordinated plan that Russia is going to move on Kyiv sooner rather than later. Will take control of it. So then that'll be another decisive blow in this whole Western mythology that's been erected surrounding, Ukraine's winning, Russia's losing.
So it's not just a propaganda war from Russia's standpoint. It's now moving close. It's not real war because they haven't declared war, but it's moving in that direction.
Yeah. This is no longer just a special military operation. This step takes it to a new level.
And actually, I wanted to get back to this picture. Looks like the guy is in some kind of residential building, or it's
college.
He's
a dorm. It's a college dorm where they're making drones.
And so
those and again, those drones, those are nuisance factor drones right there. Those don't carry. They carry no real weight in terms of a weapon. They have no real offensive capability. Good on. They found a job maybe to make some money so they can go out and party instead of him being in the army. Why isn't he in the army?
Right.
Yes. Well, but the question is that he is actually posing with this drone on non-military facility, on a civilian facility, and when the strike will be carried out on some garage or basement of residential building, when these drones are assembled, or any other civilian facility which is used for military needs, that will again cause outbursts of rage in the West, saying that Russia is destroying civilian facilities. So, but here, this guy Jay in Kiev, he actually shows people that you can strike any civilian facility because we have drones there.
Right. Yeah. No, but again, the Russians also they're able to assess the drones they're concerned about are those that can carry 2 to 3 pounds of explosives or higher. Yeah, the drones you're looking at there, they're not capable of that. So you're looking at drones that can actually damage infrastructure and kill people. And they kill more than just one person. Yeah, can you fly those individual drones and kill one person? Yeah, perhaps. But then it gets also into the whole realm of counter drone technology, what Russia's developing, because traditional drones like what this kid's likely building that are remote, controlled via radio waves. That's ancient history. The way the technology is progressing. So, but it goes back to the point. If they're going to democratize the production of drones, then Russia is going to hand out the punishment equally. It would be quite democratic.
And speaking about electronic warfare, I found it. I think it was posted by BBC. with the regional on Telegraph. Telegraph was more neutral on this topic. They didn't specify the cause. Why did navigation system of British Air Force went down when the British defense minister was flying from Estonia? But BBC, they
Right. Yeah.
went full on and said that this is Russia to blame. Well, to me, it doesn't look even close to reality, because first of all, Russia wouldn't attack aircraft outside Russian borders. It wasn't within Russian airspace, as far as I understand. And secondly, if Russia wanted to push the aircraft out of Russian borders, if it has violated the borders, then they would have sent jets. Why does British press does something like this and promotes narrative of aggressive Russia in the case where this is not necessary at all?
Well, they have to feed the public meme. They're wanting to build public support for going to war with Russia. That's the goal of this, elite, so-called elite ruling class, both in Britain, France, Germany. The bulk of the population, if you actually went out and polled the public, they don't want anything to do with a war with Russia. But the level of propaganda that is fed to the public is such that they genuinely believe that Russia is losing the war, that Russia is suffering, it's on the verge of economic collapse, that it's got a manpower problem, that it's just it can't endure long. So all we got to do is keep up the pressure. That is widespread throughout Europe. And I think I mentioned that a couple of weeks back. I had a conversation with a gentleman out of the Netherlands who was actually at a shooting event for U.S. veterans, and he had a company that did virtual reality training, and we got talking, and he started repeating all the propaganda, and I said, "So stop." And so I started walking him through some facts, and he goes, "We don't hear that." No kidding. So that's part of what's going on here.
So I want to ask your views on something here. Take me a second here to set this up, but sticking with Europe and Russia, Yelena, first show the one that says ZDF, and then a second show the next one called General. So there was a program called Marcus Lance in the last few days. Left is the talk show host, and then you have there facing us is this CDU politician. His name is Kiesewetter. And then the next picture, so these two, and this is a general, retired Brigadier General Eric Vod. So they were all on the show together. I don't know if you have seen this program.
No.
So it's very interesting. Give me a second to set this up for you. They had a full-on screaming match between the CDU guy and this brigadier general. And he said some things that you've already started to say here. He said that the Russians have determined that German companies are involved in the drones being used by Ukraine against Russia. They've already named the names. He said Munich is a hotspot for the arms industry, and the Russians have said that it's now part of their targeting, and the day will come when they carry out retaliatory strikes against Europe and Germany, first conventionally, and then they'll go a level higher if necessary. So then the CDU guy says, well, Ukraine is protecting us now. And he said, you would make a great, excellent Ukrainian defense minister. I don't want a war here in Germany. We're NATO's staging area, NATO's logistics hub. If there's any European war, it will be fought in our country. That's the great danger. And he said, you're frightening our, and then the CDU guy says, you're frightening our citizens. He said, no, you're frightening me because you're going to get Germany into the war. So they were screaming. The whole thing is all over the German news right now.
Wow.
But yeah. I was trying to find the video before the show. I haven't been able to, but have you ever seen anything like that kind of an exchange in Europe anywhere?
Well, as they say in Germany, ach du lieber, nein. Sorry. Yeah, no, I haven't. But that's good on the general. Yeah, because he's He's not blowing smoke up their skirt. This is again the Germans. I guess they got short-term memory loss because they don't remember World War II. Russia does. The the um, the memory that my visit there, gosh, it was I guess 2 years ago, March now, with Judge Napolitano. We went to a World War II museum that's in Moscow. Just amazing. It is. It's quite moving, and they've got almost a series of you start at the very start of the war in one room, and the I call them a diorama. It's like you're on the set of a movie studio. It's like it recreates, and as you walk through it. So anyway, at the end, I was one of our guides. She was like 24, 25 years old, just a kid. And they have this video display database, and I said, well, did your family lose anybody in the war? She said, oh yes, and she goes right away, pulls up her great grandfather. So even the teenagers, they remember because the loss of life in Russia was so profound. Estimated 27 million, and then the Japanese killed upwards of like 30 million Chinese. So you get close to when you realize that 70% of the fatalities in World War II were borne by just two countries, Russia and China. And the other thing people fail to factor in from, again, the Russian standpoint is it wasn't just Germany that invaded Russia. There were Romanian troops. There were Hungarian troops. There were Czech troops. There were Polish troops. There were Italian troops. There was, I think the numbers like 12 to 14 European countries were involved in attacking the then Soviet Union. So
wow.
that it's not just them against Germany. No, it went beyond Germany. You had a number of fascists. Well, France, again, Vichy France. So when you recognize that the fascism was rampant across Europe, and many lined up to support the Nazis at the time.
So what the museum that you were in, was that in Moscow, in the city proper?
Yes.
Because also, if you haven't had the chance, or I'm assuming the next time you go to Russia, there is the 1418 Museum in Park Patriot, which is it's a 1,418 steps down the memory of the war. And I forget exactly the significance. Maybe Yelena remembers what the significance of that is. But it's like what you're saying, this memory of the whole thing. There's a book that I've been reading called To Kill a Nation by Michael Parenti. Again, going back to the question of the Russians remember and the Germans seem to forget. In that book, it's about Yugoslavia and NATO's attack on Yugoslavia. Mm-hmm. Back at that time, the Germans were also a staging ground for destroying Yugoslavia. And I'm actually thinking, based on some other reading, that the Marshall Plan itself wasn't really a nice plan to rebuild Europe, but maybe it was actually to rebuild the industrial capacity to begin the new encirclement of Russia. What would you say about that, Larry?
Yeah, no, when you go back, we're fed, propagandized with a story about the end of World War II, and it was for my generation, one of the most powerful movies or influential movies on that account was Patton.
Yeah.
So because there at the end where Patton's says, "I'm not going to drink with that son of a bitch," and then the Soviets called him a son of a bitch. He said, "Okay, one son of a bitch to another, I'll drink with you." But he was talking about rounding up the Germans to continue an attack on the quote communists. Now, and so we always looked at it from the lens of these the Bolsheviks, who were sort of a different entity from what Stalin was, despite claims to the contrary, and that the Bolsheviks were intent on a global revolution, that we had to stop the spread of communism. But what Stalin did at the end of World War II, like it or not, was and he wasn't alone in this. It wasn't just a Stalin plan, but they recognized we've been invaded now 3 times in the last 130 years, so we need a buffer, and that's where the Eastern European countries became a buffer zone. They were there to protect them more from the West than vice versa. And look at it from the Russian standpoint. What were they seeing? They were seeing the United States taking SS officers and SS and Nazi officials, Nazi intelligence personnel, Gehlen as an example, bringing them to the West, giving them safe haven, allowing notorious murderers like Klaus Barbie to work with the U.S. intelligence. So, here you've suffered 27 million casualties, and now your supposed ally is coddling these very people who were instrumental in carrying out the murder of 27 million of your citizens. Gee, yeah, that's no reason to have any tension there. So yeah, this is the United States just refuses to accept any responsibility for its actions in provoking what then became the Cold War.
Yeah, I mean, also before FDR died, Russia was our ally. So why wouldn't we be rebuilding Russia? Also, at least also.
Yeah, again, the storyline that comes out of that was that Roosevelt was surrounded by all these communists, all these Soviet assets, and he was manipulated by the Soviets, et cetera, et cetera.
Same thing seemed to be about Japan, where we rebuilt Japan, because I've been doing a lot since I was just in China. I've been doing a lot of reading on the recent history of China, and it seems like Mao, according to James Bradley, the author of Flags of Our Fathers, and now this other book I recommend, The China Mirage, he said there were a bunch of people around Roosevelt who were saying, echoing what Mao was saying, arm us to fight the Japanese. And instead, maybe it was the Dulles brothers, John J. McCloy, some of these guys, they were saying only arm Chiang Kai-shek, who was a friend of, he was buttering up to the Japanese largely.
Yeah,
so again, the same thing was, we were going to, rebuild Japan. Every nation in the Asian area would be a client nation of Japan against China. So it seems like the war, it really wasn't a Cold War, it retransitioned. And now we're at this point in history with Russia saying, okay, we're done with Ukraine, and China asserting itself economically. What would you say about that part on the Asian side, just to kind of finish the picture?
Yeah, well, this we are in a transformative era. They'll look back at this as one of those historical watershed moments. The international rules-based order that we've had, established really in the wake of World War II, the Great Patriotic War, whatever you want to call it, the level of death and destruction was so great that it led to, there was an impetus behind the creation of the United Nations, dispensing with the League of Nations, the Geneva Conventions, then a whole host of international organizations flowing out of that, designed to promote a rule of law, a concept that there were laws that everybody should follow, as well as an economic system that was, in theory, supposed to provide prosperity for the world. And instead, it became a tool of Western hegemony and Western imperialism. And so what has happened now is both Russia and China going against the grain of history. Historically, like when Germany and during the 30s started building up its military, it was building up its military to be prepared to confront the world, and it did. It came close to winning, but you're not seeing that same kind of aggressive buildup of military capabilities by Russia and China. They are reacting and responding to what the West is doing, but they're working very methodically in creating this new economic infrastructure. If you look at the Chinese, for example, have created SIPs, which is an alternative to SWIFT. So, how are you going to move money between different financial institutions? SWIFT is, people that are not familiar with it, it's basically an analog email system. So, I'm Citicorp, you're you're Deutsche Bank. So I'm going to send you an email saying, "Hey, Ryan, I am sending you $100 million," and then you get that and you credit it on your side. That sometimes takes days. The Chinese with SIPs, which is called the cross-border interbank payment system, it's digital. It's like anybody that's used Zelle or Venmo,
WeChat Pay.
Yeah.
Super fast.
Yeah. So I mean, just boom, like that, the money moves. So China, that use is increasing month by month, more and more. It used to be the only way you could buy oil, had to pay dollars. They didn't accept anything else. But now, the Chinese yuan is becoming more and more important, and with both Russia and Iran saying, "Okay, yeah, we're not going to accept purchases in dollars. You want to buy Russia in particular, you want to buy our oil, pay for it with Chinese yuan."
And China's also expanding their gold and silver acquisitions too.
Yes, yeah, they're building up a gold business. So one of the problems you have in the United States right now is you can purchase silver certificates that say that you own silver, but you really don't own that silver or that gold. It's not physically in a location that you can then go claim it.
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese are setting up a system which will actually have that backing. So there's a disconnect that on some of the investments in the United States, that if you think you're invested in gold or silver, if there's a crash, you'd actually get saying, "Sorry, we don't have it," and too bad. And that's one of the reasons China has been building up its stockpile and creating this particular new commodity market in Shanghai.
Larry, and as we started speaking about banking system, I really wanted you to comment on this Euroclear fight against Central Bank of Russia, because it seems to me that Russia did it on purpose, that they applied to court. It was, I think, in the beginning of this year or in the end of last year, to claim the amount which was frozen by Euroclear. And Euroclear, they said that they are not going to fulfill that legal claim, and they rejected to pay anything back to Russia. So, but the purpose was not to return the assets, but the purpose was to show that Euroclear is not a structure you can trust anymore.
Right. And once you undermine the trust in these institutions, they're going to collapse. And Russia is going to pursue those lawsuits against Euroclear across a variety of jurisdictions. Yeah, no, so Euroclear can throw a fit, so we're not going to pay, but it's going to blow up on them.
Yeah, because there are other countries other than Russia. There are also Gulf states who are watching what is happening in the rest of the world, and it means that as soon as they don't like my passport, this means that I could be next. I think rest of the world started to understand that.
Yeah, so that's why we're witnessing what used to be sort of a stable international system. It's breaking down, and it's starting to come apart at the seams. And it's like with the frozen assets for Iran. Just take a little bit off topic, but a significant, I'm not sure what the percentage is. I think it's more than 50%, 60% of the value of those frozen assets are derived from weapons purchases that Iran made when the Shah was in power. So before the Shah was overthrown, Iran had basically paid up front billions of dollars to U.S. weapons manufacturers to produce and deliver F4s, F-16s, tanks, a variety of different weapon systems. And when the Islamic Republic took power, the West basically said, "Oh no, we're not going to deliver those to you, but we're going to keep your money." So, oh, such a deal.
Well,
And so that money has been accruing interest ever since. But uh, it was taken illegally, and Iran has been pursuing that through the courts for the last 46 years, 45 years.
Yeah, so actually, it's sort of like Russia and Iran now, from what you just said, because I'd never heard that before, and China. It's actually their patience has been almost 50 years.
Yeah.
Or longer. So the fact that they're making a move to overthrow what is a bankrupt IMF, World Bank, London, Wall Street, whatever you want to call it, financial system, it's sort of like it's high time that this should have happened a long time ago. We should have the United States should have participated in World War II. That's what I thought the Bretton Woods was going to be, but it seems like that isn't that what you would say also, or is that an accurate review?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Look, this is this creation of a new infrastructure. It is, we go back and look at Bretton Woods. Bretton Woods wasn't an overnight thing. It took like 3 years to get that up and running and operating. What makes sort of the current international financial system different is the rise of the Chinese banks in terms of being the largest banks in the world. 25 years ago, that wasn't the case. I don't think you had a single Chinese bank in the top 10. Now they occupy the top 4 slots. So China is they've been very savvy about, they plan. They lay out a 5-year plan. You always used to make fun of the communists and their 5-year plan, but these people actually, they're planning, and they're saying, okay, these are our goals, these are our objectives, this is what we need to accomplish, and they say, and you will get designated as the person responsible for moving that 5-year plan forward. And if you don't, there are consequences. So people are motivated to make those things happen. And that's why when you look at just the dramatic transformation of Chinese society in 52 years or 54 years, let's go back to 1972. It's astonishing. If what was 54 years ago largely an agricultural society, and with low literacy rates. They were not the leaders in science and technology and engineering. The rocket program, are you kidding? They didn't have a space program. They might get some Chinese balloons launched, that back then. And now here we are today, where they are the leading industrial power in the world. They are the leading innovator in terms of technology, despite U.S. claims to the contrary. And they've rapidly replaced the United States in terms of being an economic powerhouse. We're a great. The United States is a great consumer society, but boy, we're living on borrowed money, borrowed time, and credit.
I got to say one thing here, because this conversation is very revealing to me, and I would ask you, because to me now, it seems that with what we started with, as Yelena said, President Putin ordering the MOD to change course, and the Lavrov-Rubio call. To me, this is now Russia essentially moving not just in the Russia-Ukraine thing, but globally in a much more significant fashion, like what you just described with China, but it's different. It's the Russian side. So what is your message to, say, the Russian population first, and then to the American population? Because, you know, I listen to you, I listen to Scott Ritter, I listen to Andrei Martyanov, and as many people as I can. And, you know, there's been a certain sense from some of the, what I call the military experts, intelligence experts, to say, look, Russia is pursuing things thoughtfully, methodically.
Yeah.
And then other people are like, yeah, they just need to start, you know, blasting everything. So it seems that I don't know, I'm more optimistic now, let's put it that way, given that the Russian government is taking this position. So I want you to address that, something to the Russian population and the American population from that standpoint.
Well, the biggest thing that's underway right now, and it highlights the difference between Russia and the United States, is that Putin he's actually sort of catching up to public opinion in terms of the policy for pursuing the war against Ukraine. There is stronger public opinion in Russia for more aggressive stance for, if you will, for expanding the war. And Putin, up to this point, has been reluctant. He's been always trying to find a more peaceful way out of this. So now he's quite in sync. If you've listened to Medvedev, what he said in recent days, what Sergei Karaganov has written with respect to a possible use of nuclear weapons, you know, these are not crazy, weirdos in Russian society. They're actually becoming they're mainstream voices now, and the West better take heed. In contrast, Trump is drug the United States into confrontations and wars that do not have broad-based public support at all. In fact, yesterday his popularity is at the same level that Richard Nixon's was in 1974 during his second term, just before he was impeached and removed from office. So Trump is he's in deep political trouble.
And he's about to get a deal, and then he doesn't get a deal, and probably the only thing that he's going to end up getting is Iran's going to have actually a stronger hand in the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, this war is it's in the process of reigniting. It's like a slow fuse. You've let it. The one thing Americans need to understand about the Russians, particularly the Russian decision makers, while I have likened the Russians, and personality-wise, to Latinos. You know, I've lived a lot in Central America and South America, and so the Latinos are very warm, very open, just enormously friendly. And that's very, I've said that the Russians were Latinos who live in a cold climate.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
But while there is sort of that emotional aspect, the there's passion out of the Russian writers and music, etc. When it comes to situations like this, they do not get emotional. They are they're almost like Spock from Star Trek. It's logic, it's science. It's not just the art of war. There's a science of war. There's and they go with a clear plan. They're not just making it up day to day. Oh, what are we going to do today? No, this has been planned out, and with clear objectives. I think one of the primary objectives at the outset was, do not provoke this into an expanded war with Europe and the United States. They didn't want to do that because they knew, one, they were not ready. They didn't have the weapons stockpile. They didn't have the missiles in place, etc. They do now. That's been part of this plan over the last 4 years. Build up these reserves. At the same time, increase your manpower reserve. That has grown. So they're now in a position where Russia's prepared to confront the West. They don't want to, but They're not going to sit back and keep getting poked in the chest with the Western finger, because you poke me one more time, I'm going to break your finger. That's
Well,
where
it's-
Russia is.
That's very interesting now, because it just popped up when we were preparing for the stream. Ursula von der Leyen, and she went completely open and she said, we are working on 21st sanction pact, and it is aimed at lowering the standards of living of citizens of Russia. So I never experienced something that direct and that's sincere. So they literally wage war, and they want to sanction everyone in Russia just for being Russians.
Yeah.
And it was quite a statement, because always it was like, yeah, we're protecting democracy, human rights, blah, 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 ecology, eco, green, and suddenly, like, directly, you are responsible because you are Russian. I think it was very nice, and I hope that Russian people read that through, and they actually understand what neighbors they're having. And what I also noticed, that Russians, they avoid, they just disregard European opinion as such. They don't want to talk. They talk, of course, Fico was attending on May 9th parade. He was received by Putin, but anyone else, like the French delegation, of course, Peskov said that we are polite people and nobody sent French anywhere, but it looks like that French got very offended after their attempt to get Putin. I think it was in April.
I just point out, neither of you are old enough to remember what it was like in the 70s when, in the Soviet Union then, it was cool to adopt Western styles. Man, West was cool. The Soviets were rigid and, just backward, and, it was not cool. That's completely changed now. And there was this sort of subtext going into the 1990s in Russia proper, that they really wanted to be like, they wanted to date the West. Let's call it this. Hey, come on, can we like be boyfriend girlfriend? Can we go out together? They wanted to be part of the West. There was this, it's almost like they didn't have this strong Russian identity. And that's one of the things that has been developed under Vladimir Putin, this very strong Russian nationalist identity and pride in being a Russian. And this pride extends. What I find so amazing and fascinating about it is it extends across more than 100 cultural groups. When I said, had a chance to, meet, spend some time with General Abdi Aludinov, devout Muslim, Chechen, Russian. Now but that doesn't. Being Russian doesn't force you to say, okay, I can't be a Muslim. No, and so I don't know how Putin pulled this off, or the Russian leadership pulled this off over the last 25 years. But they've really created a model of society where you can be a fervent nationalist, but still embrace all the cultural differences that actually make Russia special.
Yeah, this is really, I think, a brilliant point, because idiots are going to, I think that term nationalist has been destroyed by propagandists, because what you're talking about is a love of your nation, the defense of your nation. You're from your nation, therefore you're for your nation. American founding fathers, they were nationalists from that standpoint. And what you're saying about the culture from the 1970s, I was in Russia, the Soviet Union, in 1991, and we took Guess jeans to trade for things, but it seems to me, again, going back to this book, To Kill a Nation, the attack on Yugoslavia, he says in there that part of the warfare against Russia, against Yugoslavia, for that matter, against China or any of these nations that were to be subject nations, was to flood them with the Western culture. And of course, what we know, because we're starting to reject that, the so-called woke culture here, whether it's all the different alphabets of sexual preferences or whatever, that the idea is that's a form of warfare too.
Right.
To break down a nation so that they don't have their national identity. Which can you speak to that too? Is that also?
Yeah, that's at the heart of it, and that actually is why there is such anger directed at Putin and at the Russians. I mean, how dare you not become modern and accept our perversions, where perversions become normalized to the point that and so I've lived through it. Back when I took the polygraph at CIA in 1985. They didn't want homosexuals in the agency, and you were asked the lifestyle question. Do you enjoy sleeping with men? No, well, but I mean, it was designed to weed out. Now that said, there were still homosexuals who lied and got into the agency. One of the most prominent was the fellow who was in charge of the Soviet division. Of all things, he was a real piece of work. But we've gone from that to now it's normalized, and
J.
not just
Edgar Hoover. I was thinking of him.
Yeah, Hoover was another one. The closeted, not just transvestite, but again, his lover, his colleague Clyde Tolliver, for years. So it was an open secret, at least among organized crime groups. They knew about it. This pushback against the traditional values that Russia embraces is, at the heart, I think, of a lot of, Western attitudes towards Russia and why they're so roundly despised. I mean, we go to Russia, it's about family. It's about heterosexual relationships. Now, they're not out saying we're going to persecute homosexuals and throw them off the top of the Kremlin wall. But they're saying, look, what you do as adults in the privacy of your room, that's your business. But you're not going to bring it out as parades in the street to normalize it, to say, oh, that's okay to promote this. They say it's not, and that is just a clear difference that the West has succumbed to it, and it's been subtle propaganda all along. It's a reality we've got to deal with.
I just remembered I was young and foolish then, but I had a discussion with a group of homosexual people on Google Plus. There was such a social network. They were very upset by Putin, despite they were living in the United States then. That Putin introduced a law that prohibited popularization or propaganda of LGBTQ among children.
Uh-huh.
And they got very disappointed. And I said, well, look, you have your own country, mind your own business. It's Russian business what they're doing in their country. You cannot imagine the amount of hateful comments I got. The people who promote themselves as they're so friendly and they accept everyone, suddenly they started hating me just for saying that mind your own business, guys.
Yeah.
When I said, and then I told them, actually it's school children are not supposed to think about sexuality as such because they're too young for that. They're supposed to learn math, languages, physics, chemistry. This is what they're supposed to do, but not learn about identities and something like that.
Yeah, and that's been that's created a blowback in the United States in terms of this whole transgender movement.
But I see that the U.S., the population, they push these values back. And,
and one of the consequences, this is one of the results of a growing number of people that have never lived on a farm. You don't find people that have been raised on a farm. They've never seen a transgender pig or a transgender cow or steer or bull, a transgender chicken. No, it's, there's a lot of heterosexual activity going on among the animals, which is how they reproduce, how eggs are produced, etc. And so, people with a farming background, they don't get caught up in this kind of nonsense because they have to deal with the real world. All this fantasy that you can dress up, and even the so-called furries, they got this culture where people dress up, pretend to be animals, and believe they really are. I mean, it's just,
Yeah, I've heard of that too.
It's a form of mental illness.
But,
So
sorry,
go ahead.
the point I wanted to make, that Russians, they actually like Americans more than they like Europeans. And if I see how Kremlin behaves and talks, they're ready to speak with Americans, but they don't want to speak with Europeans. So it looks like Russia sees maybe not, of course, not an ally, not an equal counterpart, but at least maybe they see some common sense in American administration still, because they to Russians they seem to be less crazy than Europeans are.
I think that they're hopeful that at least U.S. leaders might be more amenable to reason, but I doubt that. But I did note that, I was at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum back in 2024, and there was a German reporter, and and he was telling me about, because when he first traveled, he said, when I came into Russia, I was really nervous, I was afraid, and he says, I've been treated great. I mean, it was just, again, the openness of what people are led to perceive about Russia until they get there, and then the reaction of the Russians to the foreigners, even the Europeans. I think the average Russian would easily get along with the average European that's not part of this propagandized political class.
One more thing I would like to bring up, because I'm interested to see if there's any light at the end of the tunnel in the United States policy layers that would maybe be open to working with Russia and China under the changing dynamic that we've been discussing, that we have not, I don't think the three of us talked about, which is the Tulsi Gabbard exit after Amaryllis Fox Kennedy, after Joe Kent. I know they all have their official reasons and so forth. Joe Kent was a little bit more out front than the others, but there's two things that I was thinking about. One is they're leaving, and maybe there's others. Two is not talking about Trump so much, but that inner circle, just like the fight that Franklin Roosevelt had in his administration, where he had some good advisors that were nationalist, patriotic, and he had some rotten people. Same thing with John F. Kennedy. It seems that, for example, in Venezuela in January, the American forces that swooped in did that, according to the London Economist, when she was on vacation.
Right.
So she was clearly out of the loop. The leaving of Tulsi Gabbard, do you foresee that this is part of a growing backlash internally or institutionally inside the United States that is recognizing the reality vis-a-vis Russia, China, Iran, or is this just the deep state is just locking things down more around President Trump?
Well, what's curious about Tulsi is she was, on the one hand, she was seen as trying to be independent, but she is also known to have strong Zionist tendencies. So, but what I see taking place is the increased control of Israeli interests in the U.S. intelligence community, getting control of it. That you will not allow any objective analysis. For example, if you want to say, just use who's doing most of the killing? Is it the Israelis killing Palestinians, or is it like Hamas and Hezbollah killing Israel? Well, the objective answer to that is the Israelis killing more of the Palestinians, both Muslim and Christian. But to come out and make that as a claim, as a part of government policy, would not be allowed. So this is Tulsi's exit. Yes, her husband's sick, but that was a cover story. The real reason was she'd been cut out of decisions. She was isolated. She was no longer being listened to. issues that she wanted to pursue, should have been able to pursue, or not allowed. What we really need is somebody somebody who's very wealthy, not compromised, and doesn't have a political agenda at the head of the intelligence community. Why I say very wealthy? So that they can't be threatened, that they don't need to make more money, and they're not driven by making more money, but they're comfortable financially, but they can say, okay, my one desire is I want to make I want to make America great and secure. I want to protect this country. I want to have us make sure that the president has the best information possible, the most objective information possible, instead of people always coming with an angle. They're always pursuing some ulterior motive, and that's where the president. Every president needs a chief of staff and other and intelligence professionals around him that are going to be able to say, "Hey, wait a second, you're getting a snow job here."
Larry, one final very quick questions before we let you go, because we know that it's about noon. Time about Tucker Carlson. Well, I've watched his parts of his interview that he has given to Israeli TV channel, and he was very frank. I love that interview. Because he was very frank and open, and he said things as they are. But do you think he is threatened? Because I was thinking about him for several times. He's speaking such things that he can follow the fate of people who were speaking things that Israel didn't like, and they fell victims to that.
Well, I think he recognizes he has to be cautious with his security, and that he's working in controlled environments. So, but I did a brief text exchange with him after that, congratulating him on the interview, and he enjoyed it. He thought it was a blast. So
it was indeed, because I was literally sitting with my mouth open and listening to it. Our highest respect to Tucker, really.
Yeah. Well, I'll pass that on.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Larry. That was very eye-opening. Thanks.
I think we'll have a few things to talk about next week. I suspect.
Yeah, sure.
I think so.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, take care, Larry. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.